Welcome to the Cartoon Pad with Bob Eckstein and co-host Michael Shaw and our producer Marty Dundix. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hi, Bob. Hi, Marty.
That was 11 Acorn Lane, our house band. They actually do stuff in Hollywood, do soundtracks and stuff. And today we have someone from Hollywood, Tay, on the show as our guest. You know, the funny thing is I want to mention that the Cartoon Pad actually chose this over another song for our theme song. We actually turned down the White Stripes.
Oh, I thought it was 999 Primrose Lane.
Yeah.
Or 666. So 11 Acorn Lane is your address, actually.
That's the band's name. The band can be seen and heard on Spotify and other places. They're actually a really great established band, and we're lucky to have them.
I think they have magnificent retro stylings.
Well, I wanted to mention a couple of things, just to get some house cleaning done. There's a couple of books out by cartoonists. We want to give some love out to Brendan Hicks, who has 7 Easy Steps to Go to Hell. That book's coming out by Humorous Books.
I've got, Bob, I've got 5 of those already done, so I'm almost there.
Okay.
It's a very good book. It's a very inventive storytelling style using beautiful cartoons.
Yeah, it's beautifully illustrated. Really well done.
It's a very neat narrative, the way that he put it together.
And we also want to say hello to Ali Solomon, who has a book out called I Am Why Do I Need Venmo Years Old. Is that right, Marty?
Say that one more time.
That's correct.
Bob.
It's called I Am Why Do I Need Venmo Years Old? Adventures in Aging by Janine Annette and Ali Solomon. And it's a very nice book, too. They sent me one. I have one here, and it's very nice. It's chock full of cartoons and funny. I'm this old, so it's like I'm cozy bathrobe years old.
Ooh, that would be in your mid 40s.
Or I am hiring professional movers instead of bribing my friends with pizza and beer years old. Which I would say is that's like 34. Wow. Right? In your 20s, everyone's moving, and it's like, oh, let's have a painting party. Oh, you guys can help me move, and then we're going to have pizza and beer. It's going to be great. And I did that a lot in New York. So many people moving all the time in New York in your 20s, constantly trying to shove couches into stairwells where they will not fit.
Yes. Never be the guy with the pickup truck.
Yeah. I had an SUV, and I was constantly asked to help people move.
It reminds me of the one good scene in Friends when Ross is telling them to pivot. Yeah. Well, anyway, congratulations to both of them for their new books, and check them out if you can. If those books don't float your boat, there's always our book, Elements of Stress. And,
yes, the Elements of Stress.
That's by me and Michael. We actually got fan mail this week again. People are
Bob.
Yes, Michael.
Yes. We have a new segment today that's replacing Joke of the Day, which ran for only one podcast. It'll probably be back once I come up with a new joke. And it's Cartoon News with Bob Eckstein. So repeat everything you just said.
Okay, great. We have a contest coming up for cartoonists. And this is by a software company called Mental Canvas. They are a groundbreaking company doing 3D cartoons. And I'm encouraging people who do cartoons to check this out because they're giving away $100,000 in cash prizes. And you have until like October to come up with an entry. And you want to check out all the details, go to mentalcanvas.com/challenge/2021.
So it's in cash where it's like in an envelope in 20s or?
They slip it into your under your door.
Wow!
If you win,
there's no taxes because it's cash.
They actually address that in the question section of the
sweet
website.
Deal.
Yeah, it's really amazing. The work is really beautiful, and they're trying to get everyone excited about this new this new whole way of drawing where you
What
can
is
actually
what is the whole new way of drawing?
you walk into the cartoon, you go in, yet you don't have to stand outside of it. You actually can enter it, go behind things. You can explore inside the drawing. It's really amazing.
And what drug does that?
Well, that's a little bit before my time, but yeah, just check it out. I mean, I'd love to see you try it, Michael, and see what happens with your work.
Hey, I want to go there, man. Oh, and a bit more very local news. Bob and I have appeared in consecutive issues of the New Yorker. I was in the fiction issue on an essay involving Nexium, which I do believe is an over-the-counter heartburn medication.
Yeah, Nexium is a drug, and then like Nexium is also a sex cult. Is that correct?
Exactly, and they're both hot. So, and Bob was in the next issue, which I haven't received yet, but I'll get it in 6 months, wrapped up with 7 other ones in a rubber band. And what was your cartoon, Bob?
It was a superhero. So we could maybe discuss it with our guests. Maybe we could work out some kind of deal, like some kind of movie options.
And what was the name of your hero, Bob?
New Normal Man.
New Normal Man.
Yeah.
That sounds like a David Bowie album.
Oh, that would be nice.
Yes.
If only.
If only.
So that about covers. I'm going to repeat that address. It's mentalcanvas.com/challenge 2021. The most surprising thing about that was I realized now it's 2021. I really can't believe it.
Bob, we're halfway through 2021. You missed a lot.
Oh, geez.
Is the fog back? Hey, what's the cardboard back there for? You moving?
No, I'm always moving. You never can be too ready to move.
How's your little woodland cottage, Bob? Are you having successful fires in the fireplace?
No, it was a shitstorm. We had the fire department show up, and they had a bash in the windows to one side of my house. But I finished repairing the house and putting up new frames and glass. But there was no animals harmed in that story.
Next time, open the flue. Come on.
It's been a stressful last couple of weeks. Totally. I just replaced the air conditioners in my apartment, 6 stories up. And
do you just kick them out?
I'm telling you, it's so scary. I actually wrote a piece about this so people could learn not to repeat the same mistakes I made, because it's very dangerous. You need a spotter down below. You have to have someone very heavy to help you, so they stand on the cord. Like, you just don't have the cord dangling. You tie it to something or someone when you're putting in the air conditioner. These are all tips you need to know. Also, pay up your homeowner's insurance, get that all in order.
I feel like when we install air conditioning units in window units, when you first do it, you're very official, and you put it in according to the instructions, and with the side, the side expandable side panels, and then you screw those in, or you put in there's like this foam that comes with it. This to put on the side to make it seal. You do all this stuff, and then fast forward 15 years, you're inning and outing that stupid AC unit every season. By now, you just shove it in. And you take some duct tape, maybe, and you shove those side things in, and you hope for the best, and you just shut that window.
Yes.
And it's like, if it works, it works. If not, maybe a squirrel's coming in.
And you realize this 65-pound air conditioner is being held in by 2 little pieces of plastic crap.
Yeah.
And there's a big gap, and you got all this stuff coming in, and all the bugs, and all the squirrels. And, it's a good life.
Michael, can you you think of a cartoon that talks about this? So it's funny, it hasn't been touched on. And is that because there was a Jerry Seinfeld episode about this? And you kind of feel like it's taken?
By this, you mean air conditioning units?
Yeah, falling out the window.
Uh,
Air conditioning on its own is not funny. It's funny that it's precarious.
yeah, no, air conditioning. It's, no, sorry.
It is one of the most scary moments in life, though, when you're putting it in and you just kind of like, you're afraid to touch it.
I did do a cartoon of this window washer falling, and just before he hits somebody, he says, "I'm falling here." Yeah, it's funny. Yeah,
That's a little dated, though, right? I mean,
I know.
do
Well, so
buildings
are
still
air
have that?
conditioning units.
No, that people still use air conditioning, please.
All right.
I just think that windshield cleaners, the window.
Oh no, window.
Scaffolds
He
are
was a
gone.
window, not a windshield cleaner, but a window cleaner who had fallen.
Like on a scaffold.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
he'd fallen, and he's just about to hit this other person, and up above, instead of saying, "Look out," he's saying, "I'm falling here."
Yeah.
Okay. Whatever.
No, I just think that we haven't seen those guys anymore. We used to see them all the time in movies. Anytime there was a movie like with Tony Randall or somebody, they were major parts of the plot. There's always some guy giving a message to some husband who needs some advice, and the guy cleaning the windows
Yes.
was like a pivotal part of the narrative.
Yeah. Okay.
Those are the good old days. So going back to what you said, yes, congratulations to us. Consecutive weeks we appeared in the magazine after a long overdue action.
No, now we're official contributing New Yorker cartoonists, and you're a contributing weekly humorous cartoonist. You're all over that.
I am.
So
And
are
weekly
you, Shaw.
bystander.
Shaw, you're
Well,
in there.
And
Yeah,
once I
Marty.
try, once in a while.
Yeah.
Look in your mail. It's there. I sent a packet.
Marty, do right by him. Let's get this squared away. I mean,
Did you
There's
send
so
me
much-
snail mail or did you email it? Did you send me just a
I
bunch of
haven't sent
papers?
I haven't sent you jack.
I know.
there's a lot of tension in the air right now in the studio.
It's all the heat. It's the air conditioning.
Now this week, Michael, you're going to do the intro for our special guest.
Yes. And the
After-
reason I'm doing it,
Yeah.
which is more news, is because Bob's on strike.
Well, this is doctor's orders.
You're on strike.
Okay. We'll
You've
go
heard
with
the
that
news,
story.
right?
No.
You're revolting.
Okay. I'm on board.
Strike.
Well, you could start that intro now because I saw it and it's going to take you about 20, 25 minutes.
All right, I have to find it out. I have a new sign off for us. That's it for this edition of the Cartoon Bad. Thanks for listening. This is Michael Shaw saying, stay shaken, stay stirred, and stay just the way you are.
This episode is sponsored by the Friends at the Drawing Board.
The Drawing Board is a cartoonist-run agency that teaches the persuasive techniques used by New Yorker cartoonists.
I'd love to be more creative and come up with better ideas in the boardroom.
Go online to the Drawing Board at cartoonist.com and learn how to think like Bob. As kids, we all had our favorite comic books and would each month breathlessly wait for the latest round of Galactus versus the Fantastic Four, or in Bob's case, Betty versus Veronica. Many of us left our comics for our moms to toss out and moved on to more sordid occupations like humor and cartoonists. But a few talented, determined souls stayed with this art form and have risen like the Silver Surfer to become a star in the cartoon universe. Our next guest's career trajectory might be better described as a comet, having crossed through the galaxy of comics in interesting paths. He's truly a master of the comic multiverses, well known for his work on the Silver Surfer and Green Lantern, as well as Marvel versus DC crossovers. He's also worked on CrossGen Comics series Scion, Mystic, Sojourn, and The Path. At Dark Horse Comics, he created Samurai, Heaven and Earth, and various Star Wars comics. Wow, what a busy guy. His current project is Resolution, an epic tale of an outer space core of heroes who return from their world of solitude to bring a former arch-nemesis to justice. And I say it's about time. The Cartoon Pad gang have their paper and pencils ready and are want to learn more about the vast, let me try that again. Sorry, take two. The Cartoon Pad Gang have their paper and pencils out and are ready to learn more about the vast multiverse of comic creation. So please put your power ring away for an hour or so while we welcome Ron Marz. Hello, Ron.
Thank you. That's maybe the best damn introduction I've had.
Was it epic?
Epic in every sense of the word.
Yeah, longer than most of your movies.
Well, it was a multiverse within a universe.
Well, Ron, it's good to have you here. And it's important, too, because you have a class that you're teaching students and stuff, and you can really help a lot of people out there listening here. So thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate being a little flexible with your time. When you're a freelancer, you're always working. So we had to squeeze this in.
So Bob told me not to delve directly and immediately into fanboy land, but I'm going to give you a quiz question, okay? I was known as Norrin Rad and originally lived on the planet Zenla. Who am I?
You're the first character I ever wrote in comics, the Silver Surfer.
The Silver Surfer. So I read that you discovered the Silver Surfer in a box of your brother's comics.
Yeah, he was. The Surfer was amongst the old Silver Age Marvel comics that I discovered in the basement. Probably 4 or 5 years old. I don't think I could even read at that point, but I could look at the pictures, and those old Kirby FFs kind of freaked me out with big square fingers and the arcane machinery and all that stuff. But I couldn't stop looking at it either. It was frightening to me, yet attractive to me.
No, Fantastic Four was my favorite comic book growing up too. So you had fabulous taste. So the big question is, do you still have that box of comics?
I wish I did. I don't really know what happened to them. I mean, they were all beaten to hell, as well-loved comics should be. My older brother had read them until the covers were ready to fall off, and then I read them some more until the covers really did fall off.
So it's funny, I read the synopsis for that issue, and it says, while Reed and Sue make good on their honeymoon, Johnny and Wyatt Wingfoot have a strange encounter with the Silver Surfer. What has brought Galactus's herald to the heights of the Himalayas? Plus, the Thing becomes jealous of the Silver Surfer when he suspects the cosmic being has been making the moves on Alicia. So could you write that?
Hell, I'd rewrite that. But it really just goes to show that you can't trust an alien. He's gonna make moves on your blind sculptor girlfriend.
Now, Ron, when did you begin that sort of line? So,
I broke into comics in 1990, in the hoary days of the 90s. So the 90s dawned with me starting to work on comics when I was all of 23 years old or so, I guess.
well, when you were doing it, were you thinking in terms of writing as a screenplay, or you were just strictly thinking of it as the form of a comic book?
Well, I was shown the ropes of how to write a comic by Jim Starlin, one of the all-time grand masters of this industry, and one of my best friends. Frankly, I think there's actually a voice message from Jim on my phone that I haven't checked yet. I just noticed it on my way back from the gym. So as soon as I'm done with you guys, I got to see what Jim Starlin wants.
He said, avoid this podcast at all costs.
Yeah, probably. I was friends with Jim. I had copy edited his first prose novel, and Jim is the one who said, do you want to write comics? And well, obviously the answer is yes. So Jim showed me the ropes, co-wrote some stuff with me, took me into Marvel and introduced me around, and I've literally been doing it ever since.
Wow.
So Ron, what are the ropes? I mean, do you write into a Word doc? I mean, is it storyboarded? How does that work?
The process for me, and it's generally how most comics run, is I write a script. I write it in full script form, which is, panel by panel description plus dialogue. Then that goes to the artist. The artist draws the artwork. The pages come back to me and I adjust the dialogue where I see fit. And then the artwork is colored and lettered and sent off to press. So the format it's actually more complex than a screenplay. It's you as the comic book writer are kind of required to figure out the visuals of the story if you're writing a full script. And then obviously the artist interprets what you've written, and the two of you make the story, the two of you make the comic. So in that sense, you're the writer and the artist in comics are very much the co-authors.
So
that collaboration goes all the way from a very specific full script in which the artist just draws what's in the script to sort of the Marvel method of doing it, which is a few paragraphs of description from the writer, Stan Lee, for instance, and that bit gets handed off to Jack Kirby or Steve Ditko or John Romita Sr., and they make the pages. They very much tell the story, and then in that method, Stan would go back in and write all the dialogue. So to great extent, a lot of the stuff that Stan Lee wrote or created was really the story details, and even the broad strokes of it were brought to it by the artist, because Stan was the editor-in-chief and he was writing all the books, and he didn't really have time to sit down and finally craft every script that was going out to an artist. It was, hey Jack, what if God comes down and is going to eat Earth? How about that for 3 issues?
Or Jack, you want 4 or 5 exclamation points after it's clobbering time.
So, yeah, I mean, that's the apocryphal story about the Silver Surfer, is that the Surfer was not, according to legend, was not a character that Stan had ever envisioned when he was introduced in the Fantastic Four. He was Kirby's creation, and Jack brought in these pages and gave him the Stan, and Stan says, who's this guy? Who's this guy on the surfboard? And Jack said, well, that's the Silver Surfer. He's the herald of Galactus, because God doesn't talk to you directly. He sends his minions out to talk to you.
So he was shiny Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, he was the mouthpiece, and according to all the tales that I've ever heard, the Surfer was not envisioned in that story. Jack came up with him, and then in a weird way, the Surfer became one of Stan's favorite characters because he could use him as, no pun intended, a mirror to hold up to humanity. So Stan wrote the Surfer for decades. I actually had a conversation with Stan about the Surfer when I was writing the Surfer, which is kind of one of my fondest memories, where I'm at the Marvel holiday party and Stan actually knows who I am and says he likes what I'm doing on Surfer. Now, I don't know if he actually did know who I was or he did like what I was doing on Surfer, but he told me he did, and that's all that matters.
And he decided not to sue you over it. So, I mean, I really never thought of Stan Lee as a great writer, just saying, and I never thought of comic books as having great writing until the Galactus series with the Fantastic Four, because a lot of the times it was just like hell-bent for leather from panel to panel, and let's just keep it moving. But I do think like the Galactus series and the Fantastic Four sort of like redefined comic books as far as dialogue.
Well, certainly the Marvel books in the 60s, that cardboard box full of books that I discovered in my basement when I was 5 years old. Those Silver Age Marvel books were wholly different from what DC was doing at the time. There was a new way of telling stories and a new sort of breed of hero that was much more relatable, and all of whom had flaws in some way or another. The old sawhorses the DC characters all have external flaws. Superman has kryptonite. The Martian Manhunter can't deal with fire. Green Lantern can't affect yellow. So all of their weaknesses are external, and all of the Marvel characters who came around just a few years later all had internal weaknesses. Tony Stark had a bad heart, and Daredevil was blind, and Spider-Man was a nerdy geek that had this secret. I can only imagine what that was sort of a revelation at the time in the 60s, where the heroes were no longer sort of aspirational authority figures. They were kind of like you. They had problems. The Spider-Man was you. Spider-Man was the everyman.
I was more the Reed Richards type.
So the genius with the hot wife.
Exactly. And the Submariner was making time with her, so that was really steaming me.
Well, that was like that's that sort of soap opera love triangle stuff. Man, that's part and parcel of. Look, superhero comics are really soap operas where people hit each other. That's what they are at their core. Is they're sort of adolescent power fantasies, certainly, but also the interpersonal stuff, the love triangles, and the will I get a date Friday night, Peter Parker says. All of that stuff is those are the tools in the toolboxes for the writers to bring the audience back every month.
Now, Ron, to know all these characters, though, was there a Bible, like a character Bible made up so people referred to and kept the consistency like you would in a movie?
Well, do you want the real answer or do you want the politic answer?
Give me the lies.
The lie is, of course, there's a vast. There's actually Jim Starlin calling me right there. There's a vast body of continuity work that everybody's familiar with, but the truth is it doesn't really work, right? So like when the Fantastic Four were introduced, Reed Richards and Ben Grimm were World War II veterans because that made sense in the time frame. But Reed Richards and Ben Grimm haven't aged a day in 60 years, so they're not World War II veterans anymore. They're Korea veterans. No, not Korea. They're Vietnam veterans. No, wait, they're not Vietnam veterans. They're Desert Storm veterans. So ultimately, none of this makes sense, right? The time frames don't work out. To me, what's important is the consistency in the characters, the core of the characters, and that to great extent is what the Marvel movies get right. Like the Marvel movies aren't simply just comic book stories translated onto the big screen. They're made to be movies. They're not just filmed comic books. Like you have to make the best story you can in the medium in which you're working.
I do have to say,
what works with the Marvel movies is that they get the heart of the characters right every time.
I do have to say the most disappointing moment in any movie that I've ever seen is when they turn Galactus into a giant space cannoli.
Yeah, Space Cloud, not a great villain.
What was the point there? They just didn't want to write dialogue, or didn't introduce another character?
Honestly, I think that this huge guy with a funky helmet on his head and purple armor. I think they probably thought, well, the audience isn't ready for that. Well, we got to give them something that's a little more realistic. But I think the Marvel movies have shown, over the last 15 years or so now that this has been like the biggest movie franchise in the world. The Marvel movies have shown that the audience is ready for that stuff. Everybody in the world knows who Thanos is now. A couple of years ago, I did a convention appearance in Nairobi, Kenya, and there was a dude walking around in a Thanos t-shirt. And I'm thinking, man, like the rest of the world is caught up with this, really. Like a Thanos t-shirt in the middle of East Africa is not an unusual sight, right? It's just the culture has spread everywhere.
Was that East Africa Comic Con?
It was Nairobi Con.
And it's amazing because I'm making a joke, but the truth is that you've been all over the globe doing these Comic Cons, and it is amazing.
It's stunning to me that I've been to like 6 continents for comic conventions, because this culture has expanded to every corner of the world. Like geek culture is everybody's culture now. Now you can have the conversation of whether the geeks won the battle, or actually the geeks won the right to be a exploitable audience. I think there's some truth to both of those things. But yeah, the fact that I've been to Africa multiple times, I've been to India and New Zealand and Malta, and it's just because I write comics, because I make up stuff, is kind of mind-boggling.
Now, at what point did you get to a level that you could choose the cartoonist you partnered with? And if you got to that point, what were the things you looked for in that cartoonist?
It really depends on the job. Sometimes you say, hey, how about this person? Or you approach an editor or a publisher with a project, and you have your artist attached already. That happens fairly often. The other side of the coin is you do a project. I did a big winter crossover for DC last year that was a Justice League project. So it was across 9 different issues, Justice League, Superman, Aquaman, a whole raft of issues. And the vast majority of those books had artists assigned to them. So I co-wrote that with my buddy Andy Lanning. So we just kind of, okay, who you got? Who's gonna draw this? And the editor gives you this person's gonna do it, and you look at his or her stuff and try to figure out what they do best, what you should lean into in your script. And what you can give them that they're really going to excel at, and then you write the script to play to those strengths.
And would you get notes from just the editor, or would they come from people in charge to make sure that the branding was in line with what they had hoped?
That's quaint that you think people are in charge of comics, Bob. Come on. Generally your stuff, like on a big crossover like that, where you're dealing with the Justice League and Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman, and like there are people looking over your shoulder. You are playing with the company toys, and you're gonna you go into it, if you have half a brain in your head, you go into it knowing that this is work for hire. You're playing with other people's toys, and they will be looking over your shoulder to help guide you in what you're doing. It's just part of the process. When you do your own book, you do your own creator-owned book, like Resolution right now. There's nobody to tell us anything. We do whatever we want because it's ours. So it's the same job, but it's 2 different ways of doing the job. And I like both of those ways. I am okay with the fact that, DC owns Superman, so that when I write a Superman issue, it's going to go through a process of approval to make sure that I'm not too far out in left field and doing something that they're not comfortable with.
Yeah, there's a couple of things you're working on that I want to talk about, but since you brought up Resolution, can you just explain to our listeners a little bit about that?
The very short version of Resolution is, well, I'll tell you who's doing it, then I'll tell you what it is. So it's me writing, my buddy Andy Lanning co-writing with me, and Andy and I have known each other for years and have co-written a bunch of stuff. The penciler is Rick Leonardi, and Andy Lanning is also an inker, so he's inking Rick's pencils. And then a guy named Andrew Dahlhaus is our colorist. So it's the 4 of us making this book. And the short version of the book is it's a big cosmic adventure that boils down to Unforgiven meets the Green Lantern Corps.
I wish I knew what that was. So that's Unforgiven.
Unforgiven, the Clint Eastwood movie.
Okay.
One of my favorite Westerns ever. And then the Green Lantern Corps, which is this interstellar force of aliens and humans who have great cosmic power and are sort of outer space cops.
Now, Ron, this is a very independent project, though, right? And you're looking for outside funding from supporters, right? People who are following you can help and support the project, right? And
yeah, it's a crowdfunded project, just like something on Kickstarter or Indiegogo, which makes up a fairly decent chunk of how comics get done now. That aren't going through a publisher. In this case, we're on a platform called Zoop, which is ZOOP, that is new, but it's a comic-centric platform. You go to Kickstarter and there's comics and movies and board games and everything under the sun can be crowdfunded on Kickstarter. Zoop is more comic specific, so we decided to. I know some of the guys that founded Zoop, so they were opening up the platform. They asked us if we wanted to be involved, so we came up with Resolution as a project to put on their platform.
Well, that's really nice. Is there also another reason why Resolution is a good fit for this place? Because for whatever reason, is it sort of thematically outside the usual work that you would do, and you feel there's that reason, or that's not? That's just my speculation.
Honestly, it's really a we're kind of leaning into what we're known for. When I came to Andy with the idea of doing, let's do something new and different, and we'll put it on this crowdfunding platform. We talked about it and decided, well, why don't we do a cosmic sort of story, because I'm known for Green Lantern and Silver Surfer and Star Wars. Andy is known for Legion of Superheroes and Guardians of the Galaxy, Nova, the Marvel Nova. So we've both got a history, and I guess not to put too fine a point on it, a popularity with doing cosmic sort of stories. So we figured that the audience would respond to that. And we also figured, well, we haven't done that for a while. So let's do a cosmic story again for a change.
Ron, was that an idea that was kicking around for a while, and you were maybe trying to fit it somewhere else, and it wasn't working?
Not really, because we didn't know what we were going to do for this platform, and we kind of went off into our separate corners. And I talk with Andy virtually every day on Skype. He's just outside of London. So we have very much the same story sensibilities, and I think that's the reason we work together well, is that we're sort of approaching it from the same point of view. So Andy is the one that actually came back and said, hey, how about this sort of thing? How about the grizzled veteran hero has to ride again one more time, but we'll set it in space. And I immediately thought, well, that's the one I want to do, because I'm a huge fan of Unforgiven as a film, and sort of that take on a hero having to leave their safety and solitude and going back to the life that they once led.
It's kind of interesting, because when I heard the title Resolution, it felt a little contemplative for a comic book title. Like it didn't have that, cataclysmic kind of.
Well, we figured Cosmic Resolution was pandering a little bit, so so the name of it actually comes from the two points. This will actually make us sound good. So the title is Resolution. The galactic core of all of these heroes are collectively known as the Resolute. That is their.
Okay.
That's what these heroes are called as a collective. They are called the Resolute, and also the fact that our hero needs to see her own past clearly and try to get a sense of what do in the future. So she has to have some resolution of what her future is going to be. So we liked all of those. Those meanings attached to it, and we liked the fact that resolution makes it kind of a cool logo.
It's a great title.
A cool logo is kind of an important aspect on a book, because you want the thing to jump out at people. If you go to zoop.gg and look up resolution, you'll see the logo, and the T in resolution is actually the heroic symbol that's on all of the uniforms of the Resolute.
No, it's a great title because
so we did think about this just a little bit, at least.
Yeah.
But do you create a cast of characters and then kind of bounce them around and see where they fit in the narrative?
Yeah, we came up with the bones of the narrative, and then figured out what characters we needed to make that narrative work. So the main character is a woman called Zan Maddox, and we're kind of thinking of her as kind of Linda Hamilton in the Terminator franchise, the grizzled veteran who's really been there and done that and really wants to be done with it, but gets pulled back in. So she's the main character. The villain is a warlord named Tau the Desolation, and he is your big burly villain type guy. And his design is also on the site. And then there are a bunch of sort of supporting characters who are going to be involved in the story, and those are the people that kind of lure her back, or at least want to lure her back into saddling up one more time.
You're also teaching, Ron, and I got a taste of what it's like to be in one of your classes, sitting in a couple of things. I want to talk a little bit about that because there's some listeners who might want to take a class with you. And I want to first start by asking you, what skills do students need to take your class?
An internet connection, I think, would be about the first and last item on the list. Obviously, we're doing the classes via Zoom. Other than that, you kind of have to have at least a little bit of a familiarity with comics. I.e., have you ever read a comic once? Cool, you're good to go for the class. It's the initial 4-week class is pretty introductory. It's very much the nuts and bolts of how to break down a story visually and how you translate that into a script. The goal at the end of every 4-week class is that everybody in the class ends up with a 6-page professional level story that they can actually have drawn if they choose to do that.
Now, do the writers get assigned an illustrator from the outside, or do you have illustrators within the class and people are paired off? How would that work?
We don't. I mean, it's mostly a writing class. Although we actually just started a new one last night, and 2 of the people in the class are illustrators who are going to write and draw their own stories. So, which is actually kind of cool. It's always good to have somebody in the class who can draw, so that we have that resource to go to just to talk about how an artist thinks of the page and what that collaboration is like when an artist and a writer work together to create something that neither one of them could do on their own. So we don't have illustrators in class that are there to draw your story, but we are starting to work on a program where the Jacob Kruger School or Jacob Kruger Studio will pair writers with professional artists to get their stories drawn, if that's something that they want to sign up for.
Yeah, Jacob Kruger is amazing. I mean, that's where I learned to do screenwriting. That's how I got exposed to your class. And I can tell people listening that your class is fun. And you get people to think in a different way in the way they story tell.
Well, certainly writing for comics, and honestly, this is almost verbatim what I told the people in the first class last night. Writing for comics is the hardest kind of writing you can do for my money. It's harder than journalism, and I started, when I was a 18-year-old kid, still in college, and I was a journalist working at a daily newspaper. So I've done that job. I've learned those lessons. Writing comics is harder than journalism. It's harder than prose, and it's quite a bit harder than screenplay or teleplay or even stage play, because the amount of information and the amount of visual thinking you have to do to write a comic is just exponentially greater than what you need to do in a screenplay. And a screenplay, they don't want you giving a whole lot of visual direction. You're not the director, you're the writer. Let the director direct. Let the director of photography do his job. But in comics, that all has to come from the writer and the artist. The writer and the artist are the entire film crew as well as the actors. And it requires quite a bit more visual thinking and just a lot more decision making on the part of both the writer and the artist as to how these pages are going to come together.
Ron, do you get so detailed that you determine the number of panels per page?
Yeah, my full scripts are, I describe how many panels on the page and what's in each panel. Sometimes, it's a high angle shot or a low angle shot, or it's a two shot of two characters. So my rule of thumb is I give as much detail as I think is warranted in a script, and then tell the artist, look, this is how I see it. But if you see it a different way, that's totally cool. I mean, I don't ever go into this expecting the artist to be, an art monkey and just draw what's in my head. It doesn't work that way.
So it's good if an illustrator pushes back and says, I kind of think this might be a better approach to a.
Oh, totally. I enjoy that aspect of the process, because, like I tell people in class, if you just want the thing drawn exactly like it's in your head, draw it your own damn self. And inevitably, the answer is, oh, well, I can't draw. Well, apparently you have your answer.
Yeah, I don't think Stanley Kubrick would have been a good comic book writer.
Yeah, do it my way, right? So it's to me, that's one of the allures of comics is that collaboration, that alchemy, when you put together a writer and an artist and they cook up a thing that neither one of them would have been capable of on their own.
So did you ever think you wanted to draw comics, or did you just know that you weren't going to be able to do that?
Actually, there's a lot of writers who sort of started out wanting to draw comics, but I had the self-realization that I couldn't draw fairly early on. Like I was not the star pupil in art class in elementary school. I just didn't have the facility to do it. That said, I'm a huge fan of art, comic art and art in general.
Sure. I can do a great Jim Stranko hand there.
There you go. So hands. I love the visual nature of it, but I can't do it myself. However, I get to get that out in for the last 30 years. I've been able to have my cake and eat it too, because I can describe the stuff. I can describe what's in my head and how I see the story. And then it goes to an artist who is infinitely better at it than I am. And what comes back is it's still kind of like magic to me.
I needed your class years ago. I had one short stint doing writing for a comic strip in which I was given the illustrators, and it didn't go well at all. It was actually Little Annie Fanny for Playboy. I was brought in as the writer.
Oh, wow.
And it was a very short-lived thing. And you just painted a picture that it's always harmonious, but I could see how you could clash with the views of the illustrator. And that's why I asked earlier about the notes and stuff, because you guys you're not working together on every piece. So you have to develop and nurture a relationship, I suppose.
Well, look, it's like anything, and to a certain extent, it's like dating. Some people you just don't click with, and some people you do. And I've certainly worked. Now, the vast majority of artists that I've worked with, the relationship has been great, and many of them are some of my best friends in the world. And it is sort of strawberries and cream. It's just great. But once in a while, you work with an artist who has just such a different sensibility than you do, that it doesn't work. And it's not like not like there's conflict, but it just, when a story sings on the page, it, and when something just lays there, it. So once in a while, you get, you end up paired up with somebody that it just lays there. And it doesn't mean it's anybody's fault. It just means it's not the right mix.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you how you made out with someone I worked with, Deepak Chopra. He was in my books, and curious to know how it went with that.
It was great, actually. I don't think we've ever done anything more than exchanged a few emails, but I adapted a screenplay that Deepak Chopra had written into a comic series. I think it was 4 issues. For what was then Virgin Comics, because Richard Branson put the money up, and then transformed into Liquid Comics when Richard Branson decided he didn't want to fund a comic book company anymore. So that was cool. I mean, it was sort of an adventure story, but it was, it had sort of esoteric qualities and psychological qualities that you would expect from a story that Deepak Chopra did. And the way that came about was that Deepak's son, Gotham Chopra, was and is a big comic book fan. And he was familiar with my work from my years at CrossGen Comics. And he, I met a guy who knew Gotham, and put us together at, I don't know, a party or maybe on the floor at New York Comic Con or something like that. And, he said, well, we exchanged cards. And so I ended up doing this stuff and eventually, adapting his dad's screenplay. So it was that whole relationship with what ended up and is still Liquid Comics, which is Indian, based in India.
Yeah.
Dealing with a lot of Indian mythology. Like I edited and wrote stuff for them, and I enjoyed it all because it was such a immersion in a different culture and a different storytelling tradition that I learned a hell of a lot while I was working with Indian artists and Indian writers. It was a pleasure while it lasted.
So was it historically correct, or was it a invented narrative? Or
all of the above. It was, some of it was
all that and more.
Some of it was science fiction retellings of Indian myths, and some of it was Indian myth transported into contemporary times. It was a vastly different sensibility in terms of the storytelling, and I just thought it was great. The complexity of the mythology and everything that we undertook. I was the outsider. I was the guy who knew how to do comics and knew writing and knew art, but I didn't know all of the Indian mythology that, like, everybody I was working with had basically grown up with. These are the myths that they learned from the cradle. So I had to tell them, look, guys, I'm supposed to be in charge here, but like, for some of this, I don't know what I'm doing. So you have to call me out. You have to tell me if I'm making a bad call. And that took some time because of the culturally, I guess maybe left over from the caste system, left over from colonialism. Indian society does not like, you don't tell your boss he's wrong. So, and I didn't understand that going into it. So like, the cultural immersion into that was new and different for me. And I finally had to sort of gather everybody that I was working with and say, look, it's, this is a free and easy exchange of ideas. Just because I'm the editor, that doesn't mean you can't say, I don't think that's a good idea. Like, I want you to tell me that's not a good idea, because I'm learning just as much as you guys are. So once we got past that and we had sort of put all that out onto the table, the experience was even better. So that lasted for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. I did a substantial amount of work for those guys, and still do once in a while. They call me up for various and sundry projects, and it's the artists are amazing that I'm working with over there, and it's when you're a freelancer like I am, you dance with as many different girls at the party as you can.
Wow!
And,
so that's in India. You're communicating. That's like a 12-hour difference.
Yeah, it's I've been involved in projects where it was me and somebody in London and somebody in LA and somebody in New Zealand all working on the same project.
Wow.
So you have to, like, you sit down and figure out like the timing of that, and there's like an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening when all of those places are awake. And other than that, somebody's asleep. So you have to, if you're going to have your Zoom call, you got to nail that hour. It's like, it's, I don't know, 8 in the morning for LA, and, a little later for me. And it's the next day in New Zealand.
And Ron, how many people are on your dance card at one time? How many projects do you juggle? And I find it hard to imagine keeping track of all the storylines. How many books are you working at a time?
It varies, but usually 5 or 6 different storylines at the same time. Because as a writer, you're constantly juggling different projects. As an artist, in comics, you're kind of doing one thing at a time. Your month is to draw that comic, and then your next month is to draw the next comic. So there's not a lot of multitasking there. But for a writer, you're generally working on 5 or 6 or 7 different things at once, and you sort of have to, tend to all of it. It's spinning plates. It's like the guy spinning the plates on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Yeah.
You have to tend to all of them and make sure they're all still spinning before one of them crashes to the ground.
So is it hard to keep track of the different voices? I mean, you probably have different voices and sort of, tensions with different. Do you find
Michael,
yourself
are you telling me that I have voices in my head?
Yes, exactly.
It's kind of true. Not really. I guess maybe because I've been doing it for a while. I've been doing it so long that it just seems relatively natural. The thing that I don't like to do, if I can help it, is work on, 2 or 3 different projects in the same day. I'd rather put in a solid day on one thing,
right,
and keep those voices and keep that mood consistent, rather than 2 hours on this and 3 hours on this and 4 hours on this. Changing horses midstream like that is not always easy, but sometimes you don't have that. You don't have that luxury. Sometimes you do have to do 3 pages of this and 4 pages of that and 6 pages of the other thing just to keep the train moving.
Well,
I had a question about writing and about art direction, because you kind of, as a comic book writer, you are doing kind of double duty with art direction, because you have to tell the illustrator what your vision is, but you're also writing dialogue and stories and characters and all that stuff. So when you're writing your comic book and you have kind of like set direction, like a director's direction, is there like there's like the story, and then is there a whole side column that's like room, exterior, building like this, substance like this, these are the details of the room, this is the lighting of the room? Like, how detailed do you get with that kind of art direction to inform the illustrator of what your vision is?
Depends on the illustrator to a great extent. Some illustrators want, give me everything, tell me every detail that I need to know, and some sort of want you to go, here's kind of what I'm thinking, you do what you do. And I'm perfectly happy to work either way. I've worked with any number of artists in any number of ways, and my scripts will look different for different artists. But it's all ultimately it's all in there. The panel direction, the description of the characters and all that stuff, followed by the dialogue that goes into that panel. Now, generally, I will type up all of the description first, and I might have some dialogue notes, but I tend to keep those two things separate, at least in terms of how I'm working on them. I do visuals first. I do panel description first and figure out what the story breaks down visually, and then I'll go back through and write the dialogue.
So when you have World of Solitude, going like, well, what does that look like?
Well, to a great extent, like that one, are the the remote planet that our hero Zan Maddox inhabits.
Exactly.
That came from what that ultimately looked like was what the artist Rick Leonardi came up with. He came up with visuals and concept. How about this? What do you think of this? How about floating oceans? How about oceans that float above the arid landscape? So that's when the process just works great, because you as the writer get credit for all those wonderful ideas that the artist puts on the page.
That's interesting. So he comes up with like not a mood board, but a sort of some samples of what.
Yeah,
like Solitude.
Again, if you go to the resolution page on Zoop, there's a bunch of designs. There's spaceship designs and landscape designs and costume designs, the villain design. All of this stuff is there, and that's stuff that Rick has come up with before ever drawing page one of the story. So all of that stuff kind of gets worked out, and then he'll design incidental characters and locations and stuff like that as we go. But the big things, the big important things, he works those out ahead of time so that he knows what it's like, and it's we're informed of what that stuff's going to look like, and it can affect the way we're going to script it. This one in particular is a very collaborative process, because I've known these guys for years, and they're all really good at what they do, so everybody has a voice.
I'm all set now. Ron, I'm going to be emailing you later. I'm pitching you a couple of superheroes. This was all just one big ruse. This was to trap you in the show. I have a cartoon in this week's New Yorker called New Normal Man. His superpowers are downsizing and listening better. You got that?
We need that guy.
We need that guy. I have also one other guy. We have a plan B, Due Diligence Man. This guy explores the red tape side of the business. I know this is something you'd be interested in. When superheroes need waivers before they start movies and stuff, this is the guy. The superpowers are organizing, things like that.
We definitely in the transmedia world that we live in, the multi-platform transmedia world that we live in, that guy's going to be kept busy.
Yeah, he's a notary public.
And I have Merlot Man. He just kind of drinks wine, and that's about it.
Man, I wish that guy would visit here. I've still got a bunch of work to do tonight. So Merlot Man.
Merlot Man will not help you.
Merlot Man is not.
It's not your sidekick.
He's going to have to wait at least a few hours.
Yeah, Ron, we don't want to keep you much longer. This has been very generous to hear your views on this, and I hope people got excited about taking your class, because I think it's really a great class. I know that it's exactly what people would want, is to be specific about this genre, that to be able to learn how to write for this.
Well, I think there's an aspect still of alchemy to how comics get put together that the general public has no idea. Like, inevitably you're sitting next to somebody on a plane and they ask what you do, and you end up discussing that you write comics. This is in the before times when we actually got on planes. I haven't been on one in 15 months, I think.
They're still invisible. Oh, that's
yeah. But inevitably people have no idea how comics are put together. What, people actually do that? People, don't computers just draw those now? No, computers don't draw those. So it's, it's actually gratifying for me to be able to do this class and kind of expose the nuts and bolts of how these things get put together, and all of the work that goes into it. Because look, for most comics, most single issue comics, it's you get 15 or 20 minutes of a thrill ride out of it, and you toss it in the closet and forget about it. But that comic, those 20 pages of a comic, represents probably 3 or 4 or 5 months worth of work if you put everybody's work in a long line. There's a hell of a lot of work that goes into putting a comic together, just like the vast amount of time and effort and money that goes into putting a movie together. And somebody watches it on their phone for an hour and a half and moves on to the next one.
Yeah, well, your class already started, but I'm going to continually post on social media your class as well as Jacob's class, and they always come around. You have that sort of a cycle, so people who miss this group can make the next one. It's a
4-week class, so this is kind of the summer version, and then we'll do it at least twice more this year, maybe even 3 times. So we do it. It's 4 weeks in a row. And then we take a break of a few weeks, and then we come back and do it all over again. So, wow. the summer, people are usually, out and about and on vacation. So the summer class tends to be a little smaller, and then the winter or the fall and winter classes tend to get a little bigger.
Ron, do you ever see the insatiable demand for ever increasing comic hero content waning in this millennium? I can't believe.
I don't.
It's like insatiable.
So. Look, I grew up in the 70s, and the best we had was Lou Ferrigno painted green.
Oh, we had Linda Carter.
We had Linda Carter, and we had a guy in a bad Spider-Man costume. But the fact that this is the world we live in now is just mind-boggling for me. It is. But I think comics of every genre, superheroes, horror, science fiction, fantasy, you name it, are fodder for everything else. Like half of the stuff that's on Netflix and Hulu and Amazon, started life as a comic somewhere. Comics are among other things, they are cheap research and development for packaging a franchise that might go somewhere else. It's sort of like pre-visualized storyboards and concept art right there in front of you.
That's what they feel like. They feel like next stop movie. I mean, when you see a comic that's really
to a great extent, it's the stuff's all designed. You don't have to read a 120-page screenplay. It's all right in front of you.
What about Wolfman? Want me to draw something up for you tonight?
Boy, Wolfman's Marvel and DC.
No, Wolfman.
Wolfman.
He wants to date strong-minded women who are independent. That's his superpowers is dating skills, maybe.
Don't we all? It's a new landscape out there, and actually, I mean, to be serious for a minute, there's comics are now telling a lot more stories across a lot more genres by a lot more different people than they ever have before, and I think that's one of the reasons that comics are probably more popular than they've ever been now, because we're not just telling superhero stories for 14-year-old boys. We're telling all sorts of stories for a vast audience, young, old, men, women, every sort of sexual identity. There's a comic for you out there because the medium has grown up. And to me, having started in an era when comics were still basically, superheroes for teenage boys, and to still be doing this 30 years later when the medium has evolved so much, is really a pleasure, because now you can tell any sort of story intended for any sort of audience in a comic. That didn't used to exist. That was not what they were there for. But now we've, comics really have grown up.
Well, Ron, I want to thank you. I don't want to keep any more of your time. I'm sure you have to write a movie or a comic book tonight. I'm sure you're on deadline. Is there anything else you could think of?
It's the old sawhorse of you know, if you're a writer, you have homework every night for the rest of your life, and by God, that's true.
You've got to get back to the planet of solitude.
Yeah, I am very, very worried that we're taking you away from stuff, but you're always welcome back. And I'm going to try to encourage everyone listening to look into your class, go to the Jacob Kruger School. Ron has been doing some events once in a while, so you get a taste of the class. And you see how much fun the exercises are and stuff, and you get a real flavor for the whole lesson.
How do we find that project on Zoop again, the resolution?
I believe it is zoop.gg/c/resolution. But if you just go to zoop.gg, it's one of the first projects up there.
Very good.
zoop.gg.
And to follow you online, is there any site that you want people to check out?
The most frequently used one is Twitter, and it's just at Ron Marz, RONMARZ. Keep it. My parents were wise enough to bless me with a nice short name, so I have to sign books. It's a very quick process.
Oh, super. Well, thanks so much for dropping by. This has been great.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
It was
Ron.
a pleasure. I really enjoyed it, and you know, we should do it again.
Say hello to the Silver Surfer for me, would you please?
I might be seeing him at some point in the future.
Ron, if you get a chance, listen to Smartless podcast. On Monday, they talked about the Green Lantern as they had Ryan Reynolds as their guest.
Oh, wow. Perhaps not his finest hour or Green Lantern's finest hour, but still has some cool stuff in it. There's parts of that movie that I really like.
Yeah, I would love to sit down and hear what Jacob or you would have to say about why the movie worked and why it didn't, things you would have done differently, and break down a movie like that to understand why do movies click sometimes and why sometimes even, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars spent on a movie like that, but for some reason it doesn't quite gel.
I have many thoughts about that movie. We should do that.
Well, you know, I remember seeing Guardians of the Galaxy and thinking, like, what a goofy comic book. And had no idea that would ever be a movie.
Well, that's, you know, my writing partner, Andy Lanning, is the one who came up with that team of Guardians of the Galaxy.
As I said, genius. It was genius.
Well, it's, you know, when they announced that they were going to do that, I think we all scratched our heads and went, really? There's going to be like a walking tree and a talking raccoon?
It was very DC too.
But it, you know, it worked because it was different from the other stuff that they were doing. It had its own personality, and I think when you have a franchise like the Marvel Cinematic Universe that has a bunch of different things in it, and they have a different tone, it's just, you know, that's what the audience needs. You can't just do Captain America and Thor. You gotta throw some stuff out there that's a little wackier.
Like Loki, right, Marty?
I think that Loki show on Disney Plus is so creative. It was so good. It's such a departure of, like, you know, a normal superhero take on stuff. They threw him into it's almost like a procedural. Like, I don't know. I thought it was great. It had time travel. I love that Loki show.
I gotta watch it. I have not seen it.
Ron's being quiet about that. He's not committing.
I haven't seen, you know, the Vision and Scarlet Witch show. I haven't seen the Loki show.
Oh, if you're gonna watch one thing, watch the Loki show, because I hadn't watched like 3 of the last like big Avenger movies. I was way behind. I hadn't watched anything, so I just turned on Loki, and I didn't need to catch up on anything. It was great. The show is so different from a superhero movie. It's just like it's wild how fast they take it from Avengers Endgame-y type stuff to throwing Loki into a situation that is absolutely bonkers, and it doesn't make any sense, and it's totally interesting and different.
Well, the deep dark truth is, when you do comics for a living, you don't have as much time to watch all the comic content that's out there. But it is tops on my list, and it's kind of cool to live in the world where where all of these characters that I've actually written, like everybody watches them, once a week. It's cool, the fact that this stuff exists and there's an audience for it.
I watched that Zack Snyder cut of Justice League, not realizing it was 4 hours long.
Yeah, see, I that's 4 hours that I'm not going to spend, because those are 4 hours I'll never get back.
It was. I hadn't seen the previous one. I hadn't seen the one that everybody hated, so I didn't have a comparison. So I watched it and I was like, okay, this was good. It was 4 hours long. That's fine. I had nothing really going on at the time. It was late on a weekend. And then I was Googling what were the differences. And the differences were insane. It was insane the amount that they changed between the two movies. And I can't believe how much they edited or cut out, like large pieces of the story. And I only am mentioning any of this is because they in a very big flashback that they cut out of it, they had a Green Lantern character, and the ring had come off his hand, and it was finding like a new person.
Oh, and, yeah, that's part and parcel of the Green Lantern myth. So
yeah, it was a small detail that I thought was really cool, and then they just totally they cut it from the theatrical, but then they had it in the Zack Snyder cut that was really interesting. So it was cool to see some of the stuff that he put in there that they let stay, that was never intended to stay in their world. But then the online community for comic book people is so strong and just like forceful that during COVID, they literally made this company go and find this guy's movie cut, recut a movie that's 4 hours long, and then put it on HBO Max. And it was like, everybody watched it.
Well, I think that's
amazing.
I think that's the myth, right? Because that's the story that's better than the actual truth, which is the actual truth is we're launching this HBO Max channel and we need something to get people to subscribe. So let's dump a little money into it and give them a movie that they'll all show up for. So
worked on me. Totally.
Yeah.
Fine.
Well, see,
yeah,
lured you right in.
It did.
Ron, I heard you mention Thor before. My friend made that movie. I was wondering if you worked on that.
I did not. I wrote one of my gigs was I wrote Thor for year and a half, the regular comic, and it's one of my favorite characters. I don't know that my run on Thor was anything to be terribly excited about. It didn't work out like I wanted it to.
Oh.
But I love that whole mythology. I love the Marvel take on it. And I'm a big fan of all three of those movies.
Yeah, that's Alan Taylor, and he just came out with the Many Saints of Newark, the prequel to The Sopranos.
Oh, The Sopranos, yeah, with Gandolfini's kid.
Yeah, I just saw the sneak preview a couple of days ago. Very violent.
I'm in.
Shockingly.
Guys in New Jersey being violent, I'm in.
Yeah.
Ron did come up with the line, "I say thee nay." I used that for years.
I
say thee nay.
I did put that in there a few times though.
Good.
It's such a classic. You can't, sometimes you just got to go with it.
Well, it's been really enjoyable chatting with you. I don't want to keep you long, but we could talk for hours, I'm sure. But it was really nice that you took time out to do this.
Thanks, guys. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Ron.
And we'll do it again.
Thanks so much, Ron.
That's it for this edition of the Cartoon Pad. Thanks for listening. This is Michael Shaw along with Bob and Marty saying, stay shaken, stay stirred, and stay just the way you are. Bye-bye.